Oof. Just gonna need more than skin cream to clear that up. Overdue Doctor Who review time, but before I get to it, I am going to mention the sponsor, because I do have one for this particular episode. The wonderful folks over at the Radio vs. the Martians podcast. This is fronted by Mike Gillis and Casey Doran. They are a fantastic pair of nerds, and actually they tend to consider the show the McLaughlin group for nerds. They have on guests. They talk about pretty much any nerdy thing that's going on in their head. Superheroes, comics, sci-fi, fantasy on occasion. It runs the gamut. It's always interesting. It's sometimes insightful. It's oftentimes very funny, especially their little podcast mini venture, Podcast La Vista Baby, which goes through every single film that Arnold Schwarzenegger ever made. That's been quite a trip so far. So check out radioversusthemartians.com or look them up on whatever you use to listen to podcasts. And now I get to talk about the Lazarus Experiment, which is one of those episodes that I really never did go back and revisit after seeing it the first time, because it was just like, okay, so that was a thing that I saw. And having seen it again, that continues to be, just kind of a thing that I saw. Like, this is the kind of one that's bad in a really not entertaining to talk about way, because whether it's an episode of Doctor Who or movie or whatever, when something's bad, it gets me worked up. There's a certain energy I can draw from that. But when an episode is just boring, which is honestly what the Lazarus Experiment is, that's hard to do much with in terms of, finding things to say about it. There is a dog that I am watching today that is down there and is snoring, so if you hear that, I apologize. I'm not gonna wake the guy up. Not my dog, but just watching him. Anyways, sorry, that was bugging me. So, yeah, the Lazarus Experiment. So we have Mark Gatiss doing a guest appearance, and I do like Mark Gatiss. I think I at least in terms of his Doctor Who output, I tend to like him better as an actor than I do as a writer. And he's fine in this. Like, there's something that doesn't quite ring true to me about Dr. Lazarus and the degree to which he kind of embraces the monstrousness that occurs to him. Like, he never seems horrified by what he's become, which to me is weird, and I feel like we didn't get to know him well enough for that to make sense. Because I think it would take a very specific person to be totally cool with becoming what he becomes and killing people in order to keep himself going. And we don't get to know this guy. We get to know, all right, he's a bit of a sleaze. We get that right off the bat, but that's a leap to go from slightly sleazy guy to totally cool with turning into a monster and killing people. Like, that's a leap. So there's an inherent fundamental disconnect right there as far as the whole thing goes. The other thing about this is obviously the monster itself. The monster shows up around the halfway mark of the episode, and we see a lot of it. And the results of the thing, seeing it the effects, the ambition of the concept outstripped what they were capable of doing. And it is along the lines of the Scorpion King from The Mummy Returns. It is that kind of uncanny valley, does not look like it's existing in the same space whatsoever kind of effect. But even beyond that, I think the very design of the thing is fundamentally flawed because, well, I have a very hard time buying two things. One, if the entire concept of this thing is that it's somehow locked away in our DNA and because it's an evolutionary track that we didn't take, I think they went way too far away from human for me to buy that as an explanation. Like, I would have bought it a lot more if the doctor had said somehow he must have gotten like some non-human, like some alien DNA that he was messing with. I would have bought the results much more if it was that. So the explanation doesn't track with that. And the other thing is he becomes so big that, and I mean, lots of things sort of break. I forget what the law is, but there is a physical property law that, like, you can't become more than what you're made out of. So, Like, there's plenty of shows and movies or whatever that kind of break that, especially in the sci-fi fantasy realm, in terms of somebody like suddenly becoming big and monstrous. And it's like, well, you know, you couldn't actually do that because you're only made of so much stuff in the first place. But I'm usually able to swallow that. This is so far off the scale on that particular thing that I'm just like, no. And again, it just makes me disconnect from the entire thing. Like, I can't take this monster seriously, and again, it doesn't look good. I feel like in some ways it's the New Who equivalent of the Merca, which, if you know your classic Who, is from Warriors of the Deep and was an effect that was so bad it honestly probably contributed over the long term to the cancellation of Doctor Who, because there was a guy at the head of the BBC who did not like Doctor Who at all, and he would frequently cite this creature and that creature in that story as to why the show was no good. And I feel like in some ways this is the modern CGI equivalent of that. It's like what you wanted to do was too big for the means that you had to try and execute it with, and you didn't even shoot around that. You're showing us this thing a lot. Because, like, at least with something like the werewolf from Tooth and Claw, like, that wasn't particularly convincing effects either, but they at least knew to keep that in the shadows for a decent chunk of time. There were a few shots that I'm like, no, you should have put more darkness over that. But they at least tried to hide it a little bit. This one is just like, there it is! I'm like, you shouldn't be showing us that much of this thing. So, even beyond that, though, even beyond the failure of the effect, and it's a pretty big failure of the effect, conceptually, this is a story that very obviously doesn't fill the time, because it has a very natural climax with about 10 minutes left to go, and it makes up those last 10 minutes by going, oh, we thought he was dead. He's not! Now we have to defeat him again, and there's nothing new that comes of that. Like, at all. Even the doctor confronting Lazarus in the church, nothing about that interaction tells us anything more about Lazarus or about the doctor's feelings about somebody like him than their earlier interactions did. So we get no new information about any of the characters involved, and we're just gonna fight this same monster again. Like, it's so blatantly padded that the story reached a natural conclusion with 10 minutes left to go, and we're like, do another last fight! This was a really thin, flimsy idea that they did not know how to get a full episode out of, and it is painfully obvious. So is there anything any good in this? The Doctor and Martha are both solid in this. They're pretty good. I like, I think Tennant actually has a pretty good showing in this overall in terms of confronting Lazarus and all that, but like, it's not enough to save the episode. And the little bits we get of, say, Martha's mother are interesting, partially in how she both evokes and also contrasts with Jackie, because this, like, as the Doctor himself notes, this is the second mother of someone traveling with him who has smacked him. So it does evoke that, but I still get a very different vibe off of her than I did off of Jackie. That said, I don't love that we're kind of revisiting this whole the family that gets left behind domestic angle, because I'm not a huge fan of it in general, and I'm not sure there's anything about it when they do it with Martha that is any better about how it was done when they did it with Rose. But again, I do appreciate that these characters are different from Jackie and from Rose's family. So, you know, kind of a mixed bag as far as that goes. Like, I guess if I were to sum it up, I don't like that they're repeating the concepts, but the characters they're repeating the concepts with are fine. So, I guess that, I'm trying to think if I've even got anything else to say on this. Like, I've seen some people say, some places like that this is a very classic Who kind of story. You know, Doctor shows up, has a monster, tries to defeat it, but like, it's really not, because usually there'd be more of a proper build-up, and you wouldn't spend literally half the story just running away from the thing. And it's just, this feels more like a bad filler episode of something like, no, I was going to say Buffy the Vampire Slayer. No, not even that, because even Buffy would have done a longer build-up to the reveal of the thing. or would have found something to do with the downtime between confronting it. And this thing just doesn't. You know what it feels like? It feels like a mediocre installment in a slasher franchise. It feels like, I don't know, Friday the 13th, number 7. That's what it feels like. It feels like, here we are, here's the thing that's going to kill a bunch of people. You have fun with this, right? We'll string it along until we hit the required runtime. Like, that is what it feels like. And it feels very un-Doctor Who, and it's boring. For all the big monster running around, the explosion's even, fairly impressive, but it's boring. It doesn't help because it's conceptually boring. The execution doesn't work on multiple levels, and it just doesn't work. But again, not in a way that can get me angry, just in a way that's that was dull and kind of a waste of time. And I'm not sure I've got anything else to say about it. So that's the Lazarus Experiment. Yeah. It's a thing that I watched. Don't think I'll do that again. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A whole bunch of stuff to do because buttons, links, Patreon, P.O. Box, Amazon wishlist because my birthday is this month. They're all down in the description if you want to give them a look. Plus, also, the link for Radio vs. the Martians. Give them a listen. There's your little reminder. So, any of the links down in the description, give them a look. Give them a click. But it's also okay if you don't, because I'm not going to tell you what to do. Because at the end of the day, you folks are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.